when the host at my cousin's reunion dinner tapped his glass and asked me to stand. My mother dropped her fork, my brother went pale, and the room looked at the daughter they had treated like space for 12 years. They thought I was there to smile, stay quiet, and watch them celebrate lie. Instead, I was carrying the document that could tear our family myth open. Before I tell you it happened, tell me where you are watching from, and stay with me because karma arrived there tonight. The reunion was held at a private inn on the bluffs above the Columbia River, a place with cedar beams, stone fireplaces, and the kind of polished calm that made every ugly family secret feel even uglier. My family loved places like that. They loved appearing substantial, respectable, tight-knit. They loved long wooden tables, catered food, framed photos of dead relatives, and speeches about legacy. What they did not love was me. My name is Eliza Warren. I was born in Oregon, raised in a house where loyalty was always described as sacred and almost never practiced fairly. My mother Deborah had one religion and one favorite child. The religion was appearances. The favorite child was my younger brother Grant. Grant lied easily, smiled beautifully, and failed upward with the confidence of a man who had never paid full price for any mistake in his life. I was the daughter who noticed things. I was the daughter who remembered which bill was late, which story changed, which apology was missing, which relative cried in the laundry room after everyone else went home. When we were young, my mother called me sensitive whenever I objected to something cruel. When we were older, she upgraded the insult. Then I was difficult, then dramatic, then bitter. By the time I turned 30, she had a polished phrase for church friends and distant cousins. Eliza is brilliant, but she has always struggled with family dynamics. That was her way of making me sound unstable while still sounding charitable. The real fracture started with my grandmother June Warren. Grandma June was the only person in that family who looked at me as if I were not a problem to manage. She taught me how to keep receipts, how to read contracts slowly, and how to recognize the difference between charm and character. She ran a small bookkeeping office for local businesses for 30 years and trusted numbers more than tears. When she got sick, I moved back to help her. Grant visited twice in 5 months and brought flowers both times, mostly for the photographs he posted online. My mother came often enough to be seen, but rarely long enough to do anything difficult. She hated hospitals, medication schedules, bodily weakness, and any room where admiration was not automatically waiting for her. I sat with Grandma through the chemo nausea, the dizzy spells, the nights when she could not keep water down, and the mornings when she forced herself to smile because she hated being pitied. One evening after my mother had swept through with lemon bars and dramatic sighs, Grandma asked me to lock the bedroom door. Then she pointed to a flat leather file beneath her dresser. If anything ever feels wrong after I am gone, she told me, do not argue first. Read first. I remember the weight of that sentence more clearly than the weather outside. At the time, I thought she meant grief made people irrational. I thought she was preparing me for disputes over jewelry, dishes, furniture, all the small things families use to injure each other without admitting that was the point. I did not understand that she was warning me. Grandma died on a rainy Thursday in late October. By Sunday afternoon, my mother had already rearranged her living room and was speaking about closure in the tone of someone planning a themed luncheon. At the estate meeting, I learned 2 things in quick succession. The first was that Grandma had left me her original bookkeeping journals, a set of personal letters, and a modest cash bequest. The second was that the family home she had promised would remain protected had somehow been transferred 6 months before her death into a limited liability company controlled by my mother and Grant. I stared at the documents across the lawyer's conference table and felt my body go strangely cold. That has to be a mistake, I said. Grant leaned back like a man at ease in his innocence. It was part of her planning, Eliza. You were not around for every conversation. I looked at him so hard that his smile tightened at the corners. I was around for most of them, I said. I was literally living there. My mother placed her manicured hand over the papers like she was blessing them. Your grandmother wanted efficiency. She did not want the house tangled in probate. But why move it into a company, I asked. And why a company with both of your names on it? Her expression changed, not to shame, to annoyance, because I was asking in front of witnesses. Honestly, she said softly, this is exactly what I mean when I tell people you make everything adversarial. The lawyer would not meet my eyes. That was when the first real alarm went off in me. Not because of the transfer, because of the room. Everybody in that room had already accepted a version of reality I had not been invited to review. I went back to Grandma's empty house that night, locked the front door, and pulled the leather file from beneath my bed where I had hidden it after the funeral. Inside were copies, not originals, copies, bank statements, vendor ledgers, handwritten notes, property tax notices, a yellow sticky note attached to a packet of reimbursement forms. Watch the care invoices. I sat cross-legged on her floor until nearly dawn, turning pages, with the dread of someone gradually realizing they are not reading a warning, they are reading a map. The care invoices were billed to Grandma's estate during the months I was taking care of her personally. Private nursing, meal support, transportation services, medication management. The charges were enormous. The names of the vendors sounded legitimate, but the addresses were strange. 2 led to mailbox centers. 1 led to a vacant storefront. Another matched a consulting company Grant had once bragged about forming for future opportunities. I checked the signatures. Some were supposedly Grandma's. They were wrong. Not obviously wrong to a stranger. Wrong to someone who had watched her sign birthday cards, tax forms, and grocery checks for years. The angle on the J was too sharp. The final E in June did not loop downward the way hers always did when she was tired. My hands were shaking by then. I kept reading. The home transfer had been justified by a memo claiming Grandma wanted to fund a new Warren Heritage Scholarship for future generations administered through the family company. According to the supporting documents, the house had to be leveraged, refinanced, and then positioned as a long-term legacy asset. It was elegant language wrapped around theft, but the worst page came last. It was a credit authorization form with my name on it. Not my signature, my name. A loan had been opened using my income records from the year I was caring for Grandma. The address listed was the family office. The contact number belonged to Grant. That was the moment the betrayal stopped being philosophical and became criminal. They had not only drained Grandma, they had used me to help do it. I did not sleep. I made coffee, photographed every page, scanned everything twice, and called the only person I trusted with complicated facts. Tessa Morgan. Tessa and I met in college in a terrible accounting course neither of us found terrible. She now worked in compliance for a regional financial institution in Portland. She was the kind of woman who could hear 3 sentences and tell you which one would matter in court. When I explained what I found, she was silent for a long beat. Then she said, "Do not confront them yet." I already did, a little. "Eliza, I know. No more. Freeze your credit. Pull your loan history. Check the corporate registration for every vendor on those invoices. And listen carefully to me. If these people used your identity and moved elder assets under false pretenses, you are not in a family disagreement. You are inside a fraud structure." I remember looking around Grandma's quiet kitchen when she said that. Fraud structure. Those words were ugly, sharp, and clarifying. Over the next 2 weeks, the picture got worse. 2 of the vendors billing Grandma's estate were linked to Grant through dormant business registrations. Another shared a mailing agent with my mother's event company. The scholarship foundation existed on paper, but had never awarded a single dollar. The home refinance proceeds had not gone into any educational fund. They had gone into business accounts tied to Grant's luxury real estate venture, which on social media looked wildly successful. In reality, it was being held together with stolen money and family mythology. Then came the social cruelty. My mother began telling relatives I was grieving badly and making unfounded accusations. Grant hinted that I had always resented him. My cousin Rebecca stopped answering my messages. My aunt told me in a voice full of polite embarrassment that maybe I should let the estate settle before creating permanent fractures. As if I were the one swinging the axe, I would have gone straight to the police if the case were only about forged invoices in the house. But Tessa insisted we build it correctly. "People like your mother survive on reputation," she said. "You need paper sequence motive and someone independent who cannot be painted as your emotional ally." That independent person arrived in the least expected way. 3 months after Grandma's death, our extended family announced a grand reunion at Blackstone Inn, hosted by Arthur Bell, a retired hotel magnate and distant family friend who had once done business with Grandma. Officially, it was a gathering to celebrate continuity, reconnect the cousins, and announce the launch of the Warren Heritage Scholarship. I laughed out loud when I read the invitation. They were going to celebrate the fake foundation in public. That was arrogance, but it was also opportunity. Tessa thought so too. "Go," she said. "You really think I should sit in a room with them while they pretend to honor Grandma with money they stole from her?" "Yes," she said. "Because liars get lazy in rooms where they feel adored." The week before the reunion, something else happened. I received a padded envelope with no return address. Inside was a flash drive and a folded note. For your grandmother. He did not delete everything. The drive contained internal bookkeeping exports from Grant's real estate company. I recognized enough immediately to feel nauseous. Transfers, reclassified reimbursements, ledger notes referencing temporary estate float and bridge from J account. J account. June. There was also a scanned email chain between Grant and a private banker, discussing how to manage Eliza's emotional volatility if she becomes aware of the bridge loan exposure. I read that sentence 3 times, not because it was surprising, because it was proof that they were not only guilty, they were organized. By the time I drove to Blackstone Inn, I had a binder in my passenger seat, a second copy in my trunk, and enough anger in my body to light a city block. Still, when I walked into the reunion ballroom and saw the seating chart, the old pain hit first. My mother was at the center table. Grant was beside Arthur Bell. Rebecca and her husband were nearby. The spouses, the favored cousins, the glossy children, the women who had repeated my mother's lines about me at bridal showers and funerals. Everyone arranged by importance, warmth, and usefulness. My name was at the far end beside a decorative pillar and an elderly uncle who had once forgotten I existed in the middle of a conversation. It was such a small humiliation, which is why it worked so well. That is how families like mine operate. They do not always slap you in public. Sometimes they place you exactly where their hierarchy says you belong and wait for you to feel it. Grant looked up as I took my seat. He smiled without warmth. Eliza, he said, I was not sure you would come. That must have been hard for you, I said. My mother cut into her salmon as if I were restaurant noise. Not one of them asked how I was. Not one of them mentioned Grandma. At the other end of the room, Arthur Bell rose, lifted his glass, and welcomed the family to a night celebrating legacy. I looked at the binder in my lap beneath the tablecloth. Then I looked at my mother. For the first time in my life, I did not want her approval, her apology, or her explanation. I wanted the truth dragged into the light so hard that nobody could ever call it a misunderstanding again. Arthur Bell had the kind of voice people automatically trusted. Deep, measured, expensive. The sort of voice that made weak ideas sound institutional. He stood beneath a chandelier the size of a small car and spoke about family continuity, responsibility, and the values that our beloved June Warren embodied through every season of her life. I nearly laughed again. Not because Grandma had not embodied responsibility. She had, more than anybody in that room. But because Arthur was repeating a script written by the very people who had hollowed out her legacy and were now polishing the shell. My brother nodded at all the right moments. My mother kept her face arranged in dignified sorrow. Rebecca dabbed her eyes once lightly as if a camera might be near. I watched all of them and realized something important. They did not think I had come armed. They thought I had come wounded. That was their first fatal mistake. The second came 10 minutes later during cocktails on the terrace when Grant decided to be gracious. He approached with 2 drinks in hand, offering one as if we were siblings in a normal family, and not 2 people standing on opposite sides of a financial crime. I thought you might prefer sparkling water, he said. I would prefer an affidavit. His jaw twitched, but he recovered quickly. Grant had practiced recovery his entire life. You know, he said quietly, you always do this. You take every family event and turn it into a trial. No, I said, a trial comes later. For one clean second, the mask slipped. His eyes sharpened. You do not know what you are talking about. I know enough to see that Grandma's house did not become your business collateral by divine intervention. He glanced toward the ballroom doors, making sure nobody important was too close. Then he lowered his voice. Be careful, Eliza. People already think you are unstable. If you make a scene tonight, you will confirm every concern they have had about you for years. That sentence should have cut me. Instead, it steadied me, because it told me the defense strategy had not changed. Dismiss, diminish, pathologize, smile. I looked at him and for the first time saw not my younger brother, not the charming son, not the golden child who always got the softened version of consequences. I saw a man who had depended for years on the fiction that I would keep choosing emotional survival over direct confrontation. He was counting on my exhaustion. He had not yet understood what documents can do when feelings are finally set aside. Enjoy your speech, I told him. You practiced lying for it. I walked away before he could answer. At the far edge of the terrace, near a stone planter filled with winter rosemary, a woman in a navy suit was watching me with unmistakable interest. She looked to be in her late 50s, silver hair pulled into a low knot expression, calm in the way only deeply competent people ever look calm. When I approached, she introduced herself. Marianne Holt, she said. I worked with June for years. Her handshake was firm. Something in her face told me this was not random. I remember your grandmother talking about you, she said, usually with admiration, occasionally with concern that your family did not deserve your loyalty. That nearly took my breath away. She said that she was a very exact woman. She did not waste observations. Arthur Bell appeared behind her, then all gracious posture and polished regret. Eliza, he said, as if we were rejoining a conversation. Marianne tells me you have questions. Questions. Such a neat little word for a multi-layered theft. I have records, I said. Arthur's expression shifted slightly. Not dramatic. Just enough for me to know he had not expected direct language. Marianne did not blink. Would you like a private room? She asked. Within minutes, I was in a small conference suite off the lobby with Marianne, Arthur, and a younger attorney from Arthur's office named Daniel Price. I set the binder on the table and began walking them through the timeline. Grandma's illness, the care invoices, the shell vendors, the forged signatures, the property transfer, the fake scholarship activity, the loan opened using my income, the anonymous flash drive, the internal ledger entries referencing June's estate as a bridge source. I expected resistance. What I got instead was concentration. Daniel took notes without interrupting. Marianne asked precise questions about dates and signatory authority. Arthur listened with the expression of a man realizing that the evening he thought he was hosting was not the evening he was actually in. When I finished, the room was silent. Arthur sat back slowly. My understanding, he said, was that Deborah and Grant had executed June's wishes under difficult circumstances. They executed something, I said. Daniel nearly smiled. Marianne opened the binder again and studied one of the invoice signatures. I handled a vendor dispute for June 8 years ago, she said. This is not her hand. That mattered more than sympathy could have. An independent professional had said it. Arthur exhaled through his nose. Why bring this tonight? Because they are about to publicly launch a fake legacy project using stolen assets and family sentiment. If I challenge it later, they will call me vindictive. If the truth interrupts the lie in the same room the lie is being sold, people have to choose which story they will stand beside. Arthur looked at me for a long moment. Then he said the most surprising thing I had heard all evening. June asked me to keep an eye on this family after she passed. The room went still. She did not give details. He continued. She only said that if something felt theatrically noble too quickly after her death, I should verify everything twice. Of course she had. That sounded exactly like Grandma. Did you verify anything? I asked. His shame was brief but real. Not enough. Marianne turned to him. You need to stop Grant's announcement. He nodded once, then looked at Daniel. Call the bank manager. I frowned. What bank manager? The one who handled June's long-standing trust relationship, Marianne said. He is here tonight. Deborah insisted it would look good to have institutional support present when the scholarship was announced. For the first time all evening, I felt something warmer than anger. I felt momentum. Grant had invited a witness. Arrogance again. Daniel left the room. Arthur asked me for copies of the flash drive contents and requested permission to have the signatures reviewed immediately by his outside forensic consultant. Marianne quietly asked whether I had contacted law enforcement. I told her not yet because I wanted the structure fully mapped before my family had time to destroy or reframe anything else. She nodded approvingly. You think like June, she said. That nearly undid me more than any cruelty had. I had spent months being described as unstable, bitter, emotional, divisive. One sentence from the right person, and I remembered I was also trained, observant, and disciplined. The ballroom doors opened again. The announcement was beginning. Arthur stood. His expression had changed completely now. He no longer looked like a genial host. He looked like a man calculating liability, betrayal, and his own role in a public mess. Come with me, he said. We re-entered the ballroom just as Grant moved toward the microphone. He looked handsome, composed, beloved. The room leaned toward him the way rooms always had. My grandmother, he began, believed that family is not just where we come from. It is what we invest in for the future. The audacity of that sentence was almost artistic. My mother watched him with damp-eyed pride. Rebecca reached for her husband's hand. A few cousins smiled at me from across the room in that pitying way people do when they think they know who the difficult one is. Grant continued speaking about sacrifice, stewardship, honoring June, expanding opportunity for future generations. Then he announced the Warren Heritage Scholarship as a living testament to her values. Applause began. Arthur Bell lifted one hand. The room quieted slowly. Grant turned, still smiling, expecting perhaps a friendly addition, a host's endorsement. Arthur stepped beside him. I believe, he said carefully, that before this evening continues, we need clarity regarding the estate from which this scholarship is supposedly drawn. You could feel the room change. Not loudly, not yet, but like weather pressure before a storm. Grant's smile stayed in place a second too long. I am sure any questions can be addressed later, he said. No, Arthur replied. They should be addressed now. My mother sat upright, her face emptied. That was always her tell, not panic, erasure. She was already preparing to rebuild the story. Daniel reappeared near the side wall with a man in a charcoal suit carrying a leather portfolio. Older, neat, alert. Arthur introduced him simply. Mr. Nolan from First Cascade Private Bank. Grant's shoulders tightened. The banker did not take the microphone. He did not need to. Men like him carried authority as if it were stitched into the cuffs. I was asked to attend tonight in support of the proposed scholarship announcement, he said. Given information brought to our attention this evening, I must state that there are unresolved irregularities connected to June Warren's estate instruments, asset transfers, and representations made to third parties. A cousin dropped her spoon. Someone at the back whispered, "What irregularities?" Grant stepped forward. "This is inappropriate." Marianne did not raise her voice when she answered, which made it land harder. "So is elder fraud." The room exploded into motion without anyone actually moving very much. Heads turned, chairs scraped. My aunt made a soft, strangled sound. Rebecca looked from Grant to my mother to me, as if she were trying to locate the safe version of reality, and could not find it. My mother rose at last. "This is absurd," she said. "Eliza has been spiraling since my mother passed, and I will not have a family memorial turned into one of her episodes." There it was, the old weapon, publicly polished. Normally that sentence would have turned the room against me in under 10 seconds. But Arthur was already done indulging theater. "Eliza," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom, "would you please stand up?" Every eye in the room came to me. I stood. My legs were steady. Arthur looked at the family that had spent years seating me at the edges of my own life. "Eliza Warren," he said, "is the first person tonight to bring verifiable documentation regarding June Warren's actual estate activity. Until those records are reviewed in full, this scholarship announcement is suspended, and any public claims attached to it are withdrawn." Silence hit so hard it felt physical. Grant stared at me like he no longer recognized the shape of the story. My mother's mouth parted, but nothing came out. Arthur turned slightly toward Daniel, then back to the room. "And there is one more matter," he said. "June left instructions through private correspondence and institutional review triggers that if concerns arose regarding misuse of her assets, Miss Warren's records and testimony were to be treated as primary, not peripheral." The host had asked me to stand. But what he had really done was something my family had denied me for years. He had moved me from the margin to the center in front of everyone using the only language they had ever truly respected: authority. And that was the moment the reunion stopped being a celebration and became a reckoning. The silence that followed Arthur Bell's statement did not last long. Silence never survives long in rooms where reputation is suffocating. The murmurs began first, then whispers, then questions that were meant to sound neutral but carried unmistakable alarm. "What does he mean, irregularities? Is this about the house? Deborah, what is going on?" My mother did not answer immediately. That was unusual. Deborah Warren was famous in our extended family for immediate explanations. She always had one ready, polished, and sympathetic. But this time the explanation had not been rehearsed for public daylight. Grant stepped forward again, his posture straight, voice smooth. "Everyone needs to relax," he said. "There is a misunderstanding about administrative filings connected to the Scholarship Foundation. Eliza has always been emotional about financial matters." Several relatives nodded instinctively. Years of conditioning were difficult to undo in one evening. But the difference tonight was that Grant no longer controlled the room alone. Arthur Bell lifted his hand again. "This is not a misunderstanding," he said calmly. "The matter involves the estate records of June Warren and financial instruments connected to that estate." He turned toward me. "Eliza, would you mind joining us at the front table?" The room watched as I walked forward. For the first time in my life, the long Warren family table did not feel like a place where I was unwelcome. It felt like a stage where the script had finally changed. Marianne Holt moved beside me, placing the binder on the polished wood surface. Daniel Price connected a laptop to the projection screen used earlier for childhood photographs and family slideshows. Now it displayed spreadsheets, bank ledgers, vendor invoices, transfer summaries. The romance of family memory dissolved instantly under the fluorescent clarity of accounting. This, Daniel said carefully, is the invoice stream submitted during June Warren's final illness. Rows appeared across the screen. Private nursing, transportation, meal support, medication management, except the vendor addresses led to mailbox centers and inactive corporate shells. The signatures did not match known documents, and the payments had been approved through a limited liability company created by Deborah and Grant Warren. Gasps spread across the room like ripples. My aunt leaned toward the screen as if the closer she looked, the more likely the explanation would return. Grant tried to interrupt. "This is being taken wildly out of context." Marianne spoke without raising her voice. "Context will be provided." Then she introduced herself fully. Former estate litigation advisor, financial compliance consultant, a woman who had audited charities and private foundations for 3 decades. She did not accuse. She explained, which was worse. Because explanations make denial sound childish. She walked the room through the structure of elder asset diversion. How shell vendors could be used to siphon funds quietly while maintaining the appearance of legitimate care services. How property transfers could be justified through fictional charitable plans. How emotional family narratives often functioned as shields for financial manipulation. I watched the faces around the room change slowly. Shock, disbelief, calculation. My cousin Rebecca stopped looking at my mother and began studying the documents instead. Grant's jaw tightened. My mother's composure cracked for the first time when Daniel displayed the property transfer document. The house. Grandma's house. Transferred into the Warren Heritage Foundation Administrative Company 6 months before her death. Refinanced. Leveraged. Collateralized for Grant's real estate venture. The room erupted. "Deborah, what is this? You said the house was protected. Grant, you told us the scholarship was funded already." Grant tried to take control again. "You are all reacting to partial information." That was when the bank manager, Nolan Hartley, spoke again. "The refinancing funds did not enter any charitable trust," he said quietly. "They entered a development holding account connected to Mr. Warren's private business venture." The room fell silent again. My brother finally looked at me directly, not with confidence, with anger. The kind that appears when someone realizes their version of reality is collapsing faster than they can rebuild it. "You did this," he said. I met his gaze. "No, I found it." Arthur Bell leaned forward slightly. "And we will continue verifying it." That sentence changed everything. Because verification meant investigation. Investigation meant time. And time meant my family could not simply bury the story overnight. After the presentation paused, several relatives approached me cautiously. My Uncle Robert, who had barely spoken to me in years, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Eliza, why did you not tell us earlier?" I considered the question honestly. Because nobody was listening earlier. He did not argue. Rebecca approached next. Her voice was smaller than usual. "If this is true, then the scholarship never existed," I said gently. She nodded slowly. The alliances were beginning. Not loud ones, not dramatic ones, but quiet shifts. People who had ignored me were now asking questions. People who had repeated my mother's explanations were now reconsidering them. Marianne watched it happen with the calm satisfaction of someone who understood human dynamics well. "Truth does not need everyone," she whispered to me. "It only needs enough people who are finally willing to look." By the time the dinner resumed, the reunion had transformed into something else entirely. Clusters of relatives debated quietly. Some defended my mother. Some blamed Grant. Some blamed me. But the one thing nobody could do anymore was pretend nothing had happened. I sat at the front table beside Arthur, Marianne, and Daniel. The position that had been denied to me my entire life now existed because of evidence, because of preparation, because of patience, and because my grandmother had known exactly what kind of family she was leaving behind. But the night was far from over, because somewhere in that room among the new alliances forming around truth, someone was already planning to destroy it. It happened later that night, not loudly, not dramatically. Betrayals inside families rarely announce themselves. They slip in quietly when exhaustion sets in. The reunion dinner ended with polite chaos. Conversations overlapped, chairs scraped, and relatives drifted into the lobby bar or outside terrace. Arthur and Marianne remained with Daniel, reviewing copies of the documents. The banker had already left to begin internal reporting procedures. For the first time in hours, I stepped outside alone. Cold air hit my face like relief. The river below the bluff was black and slow under the night sky. For a few minutes, I let myself breathe. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Come back inside immediately." My stomach tightened. When I returned to the conference suite, the atmosphere had changed completely. Arthur stood by the table with a grim expression. Marianne's calm face had hardened. Daniel looked furious. What happened? I asked. Daniel turned the laptop toward me. The email on the screen was from an anonymous sender. Attached were several photographs. They showed my binder, my flash drive, my handwritten notes, and a message. These documents were manipulated by Eliza Warren in an attempt to defame her family and gain control of the estate. Below it were additional attachments, screenshots of edited spreadsheets, altered transaction histories, files that looked similar to my evidence but were clearly fabricated. The message had already been forwarded to several members of the Warren family group email, and to Arthur Bell, and to the bank. My chest went cold. They are trying to discredit everything I whispered. Marianne nodded slowly. Someone inside this room accessed your materials. I felt my stomach drop. Only 4 people had been here. Arthur, Marianne, Daniel, and one other person, Rebecca. She had stepped inside earlier during the review. She had offered sympathy. She had asked to see the documents. Daniel saw the realization on my face. You think it was your cousin? I do not think, I said quietly. I know. Arthur closed the laptop slowly. Your family is fighting for survival now. That makes people dangerous. A knock sounded at the door. Daniel opened it. Rebecca stood there. Her eyes were red. Eliza, she said breathlessly, you have to stop this. The room froze. Stop what? I asked. This whole investigation, she said, it is destroying the family. Daniel stepped forward. You accessed confidential evidence and distributed falsified material. Rebecca's face twisted. I did not falsify anything. Yes, Marianne said calmly, you did. Rebecca looked at me then, and the apology I expected never came. Instead, she said the one sentence that confirmed everything. You should have just let it go. The room fell silent again. Years of family conditioning spoke through her voice. Harmony mattered more than truth. Image mattered more than justice. Grandma's legacy mattered less than keeping the illusion intact. You helped them steal from her, I said quietly. Rebecca's expression hardened. I helped protect the family. Arthur stepped forward. Miss Warren, you have just admitted interfering with an ongoing financial review. Rebecca's confidence faltered for the first time. You cannot prove that. Daniel slid the laptop toward her. The email came from a device connected to the inn's private network, specifically from the guest account assigned to your room. Rebecca went pale. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then she whispered something I did not expect. They promised it would only buy time. Time to rewrite the story. Time to paint me as unstable again. Time to bury the evidence. My chest hurt, but not from surprise, from recognition. The family system was still fighting exactly the way it always had, and Rebecca had chosen her side. But she had also made one fatal mistake. She had acted in a room full of professionals, and professionals document everything. Marianne closed the laptop slowly. Well, she said calmly, that changes the timeline considerably. The moment Rebecca admitted she had interfered with the documents, the energy in the conference suite shifted again. But this time it shifted in my favor. For months, my family had relied on one narrative: Eliza is emotional. Eliza exaggerates. Eliza misreads situations. Rebecca had just destroyed that defense in front of the very people who mattered most. Marianne Holt folded her hands calmly on the table. Rebecca, she said, what you have done is not family mediation. It is obstruction. Rebecca's shoulders trembled. For the first time since the confrontation began, the confidence drained from her face. I was trying to protect everyone, she said weakly. Everyone, Daniel asked. Your aunt and your cousin who siphoned estate funds through fabricated vendors. Rebecca could not answer. Arthur Bell walked slowly toward the window and looked out at the dark river for a moment before turning back. Eliza, he said, we are going to secure your evidence properly. He gestured toward Daniel. Chain of custody begins now. That phrase mattered, because chain of custody transforms personal accusations into admissible proof. Daniel photographed the binder, logged the flash drive, and duplicated every file onto a secure legal drive. Marianne began documenting the sequence of events, including Rebecca's interference and her admission. Rebecca sank into a chair, stunned. You cannot do this to the family, she whispered. Marianne answered gently but firmly. The family did this to itself. The door opened again. This time, a tall man with salt and pepper hair stepped inside. His posture carried quiet authority. Arthur nodded toward him. Eliza, this is Victor Ramirez. Victor extended his hand. I run forensic accounting for First Cascade's Fraud Investigation Division. I blinked in surprise. I thought Mr. Nolan was the bank representative. He is, Victor said. But when the bank manager heard the situation tonight, he asked me to review the evidence personally. He opened his laptop and began examining the files Daniel had copied. Within minutes, he spoke. These internal ledgers from Grant's company reference what they call the June Bridge account. He looked up. That is not accidental language. It means the estate was used temporarily to cover cash flow gaps. How much? Arthur asked quietly. Victor ran several calculations. Based on these ledgers, approximately $900,000 moved through the structure. The room fell silent again. Rebecca's breath caught. That cannot be right, she whispered. Victor did not react emotionally. It is worse than that. He projected a spreadsheet onto the wall. Columns of transfers appeared. Vendor payments, loan adjustments, foundation allocations that never existed, and one column labeled identity leverage. Victor pointed to the line. That is where Eliza's financial profile was used to support a credit instrument. My stomach tightened. Without authorization, yes, he said calmly, and that makes the exposure significantly larger. Arthur Bell rubbed his temple. This is not a family dispute anymore. No, Victor replied. It is organized financial fraud. The words hung in the room like thunder. For the first time since the reunion began, I felt the balance shift completely. Not because I had won, because professionals were now involved who had no emotional stake in protecting the Warren reputation. Victor worked for nearly an hour reviewing the data. When he finally looked up again, his voice carried quiet certainty. Eliza, your documentation is thorough. Thank you, but we will need additional confirmation. Of what? The property refinancing chain. I frowned slightly. That was done through Grant's investment firm. Victor nodded. And that firm used a title intermediary. He pulled up another document. And that intermediary just happened to be a company audited by my team 2 years ago. The room became very still. Victor smiled slightly, which means we already have most of their internal records. For the first time all evening, Arthur laughed softly. That is extraordinarily convenient. Victor shrugged. Fraud networks often reuse service providers. He closed the laptop. Give me until morning. By then we will know exactly where the money went. Rebecca whispered something under her breath. What? She looked at me. They will destroy us. I studied her face for a long moment. No, I said quietly. The truth will. Outside the conference room, the reunion had dissolved into restless conversation. Relatives were already leaving early. Phones buzzed with messages. Rumors spread faster than the river wind. But inside the room, something stronger had formed. An alliance built on facts instead of family pressure. Arthur Bell, Marianne Holt, Daniel Price, Victor Ramirez, and me. For the first time since my grandmother died, I felt what she must have felt when she kept those records. Not just anger, responsibility. Because truth once uncovered demands follow through. Victor packed his laptop and stood. I will contact the bank compliance division tonight. And law enforcement, Arthur asked. Victor nodded. That will come next. I looked down at the binder in front of me. Grandma's handwriting still marked several pages. Watch the care invoices. I had watched them. And now the entire system that stole from her was about to collapse. But before the night ended, the final confrontation still waited. Because my mother and brother had not yet realized the investigation had already moved beyond their control. And when they did, the fall would be immediate. Morning arrived faster than anyone expected. The reunion hotel lobby was quieter, but tension hung in the air like fog. News travels fast inside families. By sunrise, everyone knew the celebration had turned into an investigation. My mother tried one last time to salvage control. She requested a private meeting with Arthur Bell in the hotel library. Grant stood beside her. Their confidence had returned slightly overnight. That alone told me they still believed influence could save them. Arthur agreed to meet, but he did not meet them alone. Marianne sat beside him. Victor stood by the fireplace with a tablet. Daniel remained near the door, and I took the chair directly across from my mother. She looked at me with the same expression she had used when I was 15 and refused to apologize for something I had not done. Cold disappointment. Eliza, she said, this has gone far enough. Grant nodded. You have embarrassed the entire family. I said nothing. Victor tapped the screen of his tablet and projected a new document onto the library television. A detailed transaction map. Money flows, vendor shells, loan structures, property refinancing routes, every movement of funds tied neatly together. Victor spoke calmly. The preliminary forensic review is complete. My mother's composure cracked. What review? Victor continued. The funds diverted from June Warren's estate were routed through 4 shell vendors and 2 corporate holding accounts. Grant stepped forward angrily. This is harassment. Victor ignored him. The funds were then used to support Mr. Warren's development company and collateralize real estate acquisitions. Arthur folded his hands. And the forged care invoices. Victor tapped another file. Confirmed fraudulent, Marianne added quietly. The signatures do not match June Warren's verified handwriting. My mother stood abruptly. This is outrageous. But Victor was not finished. The final element concerns identity misuse. My pulse quickened. Victor looked directly at Grant. A credit instrument was opened using Eliza Warren's financial information without authorization. Grant's face went white. That is not possible. Victor turned the screen. A scanned document appeared. The loan authorization, Grant's digital approval signature, and the IP address from which it had been filed. Grant staggered back slightly. That cannot prove anything, Victor replied calmly. It proves enough. Arthur Bell stood. This meeting is concluded. My mother tried again. You cannot believe her over your own friends. Arthur looked at her steadily. I believe the documents. Marianne spoke next. And the bank fraud division. Victor finished the sentence. And law enforcement. Silence filled the library. The illusion finally broke. Grant sat down slowly. My mother stared at the screen as if sheer willpower might erase it. But evidence does not vanish for pride. Outside the window, police vehicles arrived quietly in the parking lot. Victor had already contacted them. The officers entered calmly, speaking first with Arthur and Victor. Then they approached Grant. He did not resist. My mother collapsed into a chair, whispering something I could not hear. For years, she had controlled every narrative in the Warren family. Now the story belonged to facts. Rebecca stood in the hallway watching silently. When the officers led Grant away, she covered her face and began to cry. The reunion ended not with speeches or applause, but with accountability. Over the following months, the investigation confirmed everything. Grant was charged with fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation of an elderly person. My mother faced civil liability for the estate transfers and vendor shells. The Warren Heritage Foundation never existed beyond the paper used to hide the theft. The house was returned to the estate. Grandma's legacy was restored properly. But the most important change was not legal. It was personal. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to earn approval from people who valued appearance more than integrity. And something surprising happened. A different kind of family formed. Arthur invited me to join the advisory board for the real scholarship he created in Grandma's name. Marianne became a mentor. Victor occasionally called just to check how things were going. And several cousins who had once ignored me quietly reached out with apologies. Not all relationships survive truth, but the ones that do become stronger than silence. So I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the person in your family who saw the truth first, while everyone else preferred the comfortable lie? If you have, tell me your story in the comments. And if this story reminded you that justice sometimes takes patience, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes that truth still matters. Thank you for spending this time with me. And wherever you are watching from tonight, I hope your own story leads you toward honesty, courage, and the kind of family you choose for yourself.